When mechanic Henry Jackson picked up a woman in a torn wedding dress on the rain-soaked streets of Millbrook, he had no idea she was the billionaire daughter of tech mogul Alexander Whitmore, or that saving her would put his own family in the crosshairs of one of the most powerful men in the country. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Patterson's Auto Repair flickered overhead as Henry Jackson wiped the grease from his hands with a worn shop rag. The clock on the wall read 11:30 p.m., and his shoulders ached from 14 straight hours of working on everything from rusted pickup trucks to luxury sedans that their wealthy owners couldn't be bothered to maintain properly. At 32, Henry had learned that life rarely gave you what you wanted. It gave you what you could fight for. Another double shift in the books, he muttered to himself, gathering his tools and securing them in his toolbox. The auto shop was quiet now, save for the distant hum of the vending machine and the occasional drip of oil from the car he'd been working on. Henry's reflection caught in the black window of the garage door. Tired brown eyes, calloused hands, and the kind of exhaustion that came from being both a father and the sole provider for his family. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, Grace. "Lily's asleep. Made her favorite mac and cheese for dinner. Drive safe, honey." Henry smiled despite his weariness. His 8-year-old daughter Lily was the light of his world, the one perfect thing that had come from his marriage to Rebecca before cancer took her 3 years ago. Since then, it had been just him, Lily, and his mother, Grace, who helped with childcare while he worked overtime to keep their small household afloat. Henry locked up the shop and walked to his 10-year-old Ford Ranger, its blue paint faded and its engine running on determination and prayer. He'd rebuilt that engine twice in the past year, but it was reliable transportation, and that's all he needed. As he pulled out of the parking lot onto Riverside Drive, the first drops of rain began to splatter against his windshield. The streets of Millbrook were empty at this hour. It was a mid-sized city nestled in the Cascade Valley, where working-class neighborhoods bordered the affluent Hillcrest district, where the tech executives and old-money families lived. Henry had grown up on the south side of town, where his father had worked at the paper mill before it closed down, forcing him to learn that if you wanted something in life, you had to earn it with your own 2 hands. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the late autumn night into a blur of streetlights and wet pavement. Henry's windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically as he drove through the downtown district, past the closed shops and darkened office buildings. He was thinking about Lily's upcoming school play. She was going to be a sunflower in the fall production when he saw her. A figure stumbled into the cone of his headlights, arms waving frantically. Henry slammed on his brakes, his heart lurching into his throat as his truck skidded slightly on the wet asphalt. The woman was soaking wet, her long auburn hair plastered to her face, and she was wearing what had once been an elegant wedding dress. Now it was torn, muddy, and completely ruined. The intricate beadwork that probably cost more than Henry made in a month was coming apart, and the silk fabric clung to her shivering frame. She was barefoot, and even through the driving rain, Henry could see the desperation in her green eyes. This wasn't some drunk college student or someone playing a prank. This woman was terrified. She rushed to his passenger window, pounding on the glass with desperate fists that left muddy smears on the surface. "Please," she screamed, her voice barely audible through the storm in the truck's cab. "Please help me, they're coming for me." Henry hesitated for only a moment. Every instinct he'd developed as a father, every warning his mother had given him about picking up strangers, told him this was dangerous, that he should drive away and call the police. But looking at this woman, this beautiful, terrified woman in a destroyed wedding dress, he couldn't just leave her there. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of refined features that spoke of privilege and education. But right now she looked like nothing more than a scared human being who needed help. Rebecca had always told him that a person's character was measured not by what they did when it was easy, but by what they did when it was hard, when helping someone might cost you something. Henry reached over and unlocked the passenger door. She threw herself into his truck, gasping and shaking, bringing with her the scent of expensive perfume mixed with rain and fear. "Drive," she pleaded, looking back through the rear window with wild eyes. "Please, just drive, they can't find me here." Henry didn't ask questions. He pressed the accelerator and pulled away from the curb, his mind racing as fast as his heartbeat. The woman beside him was trembling violently, her breathing rapid and shallow. She looked like she might pass out from exhaustion and panic. Hey, Henry said softly, trying to keep his voice calm while his own adrenaline spiked. You're safe now. What's your name? She looked at him with those terrified green eyes, and for a moment, Henry forgot how to breathe. Even drenched and panicked, there was something striking about her. Her bone structure was delicate but strong, and despite the fear etched across her face, there was an intelligence in her gaze that spoke of someone who was used to being in control of her own life. Cassandra, she whispered, her voice shaking, my name is Cassandra Whitmore. The name hit Henry like a physical blow. Whitmore. As in Alexander Whitmore, the tech billionaire whose face was on magazine covers and news reports. The man who owned Whitmore Technologies, one of the largest software companies in the country, the family that lived in the massive estate overlooking Millbrook from the hills, the ones who donated wings to hospitals and had buildings named after them. As in Alexander Whitmore? Henry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Cassandra nodded, fresh tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. He's my father, and if he finds me tonight, I'll never be free again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Henry gripped the steering wheel tighter as he processed what Cassandra had just told him. Alexander Whitmore's daughter. The richest man in 3 states, maybe the entire Pacific Northwest. The man whose company logos were on half the buildings in downtown Millbrook, whose philanthropic efforts made front-page news, and whose political influence reached all the way to Washington, D.C. Your father, Henry said slowly, glancing in his rearview mirror at the empty street behind them. Alexander Whitmore doesn't just let people walk away, especially not his own daughter. What happened tonight? Cassandra wrapped her arms around herself, the wet fabric of her wedding dress clinging to her small frame. She was still shivering, though Henry wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from fear. I ran away from my wedding, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I couldn't do it. I couldn't marry him. Henry felt his eyebrows rise. A runaway bride. And not just any runaway bride, the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country. He'd heard about arranged marriages in movies and history books, but never imagined they still happened in modern America, especially among the ultra-wealthy. Okay, he said slowly, trying to process this information while navigating through the rain-slicked streets. That's your choice. But why are you so scared? Why would your father's people be chasing you? Cassandra's laugh was bitter and frightening, a sound that had no place coming from someone so young. You don't understand. My father doesn't just suggest things. He controls everything and everyone around him. When Alexander Whitmore wants something to happen, it happens. And he wanted this marriage to happen more than anything. Who were you supposed to marry? Henry asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Senator David Thornfield's son, Jonathan, Cassandra said, and Henry could hear the disgust in her voice. It was all arranged. A political alliance disguised as a love story. Jonathan Thornfield gets access to Whitmore Technologies' resources and my father's political connections. My father gets a direct line to the senator's influence in Washington and guarantees that future legislation will favor his business interests. Henry felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the rain. And you get what in this arrangement? I get to be a beautiful, silent accessory to their political ambitions, Cassandra said, her voice growing stronger with anger. I get to smile for cameras, host dinner parties, and produce heirs to carry on both family legacies. I get to disappear. The rain was coming down harder now, and Henry had to lean forward to see through the windshield. So you ran? I ran, Cassandra confirmed, staring out at the passing streetlights. The wedding was supposed to be this massive affair. 300 guests, including governors, congressmen, tech industry leaders, old money families from the East Coast. It was less of a wedding and more of a political summit disguised as a social event. Henry was trying to wrap his mind around this world that was so far removed from his own experience. What made you decide to run tonight? Cassandra turned to look at him, and Henry saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. This afternoon, during the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Jonathan talking to his fraternity friends from Harvard. He was laughing about how he'd landed the Whitmore princess and how I was perfectly trained to be the ideal political wife. He said I came with a built-in fortune and connections that would make his political career effortless. The disgust in her voice was palpable, and Henry felt his own anger rising. No woman should be talked about that way, especially not by the man who was supposed to love and protect her. He compared me to a thoroughbred horse, Cassandra continued, her hands clenched into fists. Good breeding, excellent pedigree, and well-trained. Like I was livestock he'd acquired for breeding purposes. That's when you knew you couldn't go through with it, Henry said. That's when I knew I'd rather die free than live as someone's prized possession, Cassandra replied. So during the dinner, I excused myself to the ladies' room, hiked up my dress, and climbed out a second-story window. I'd been running through Millbrook for over 2 hours, trying to get as far away from the Hillcrest Country Club as possible. As if summoned by her words, Henry noticed headlights in his rearview mirror. A black Mercedes SUV was following them, maintaining the same distance despite Henry's changes in speed. His blood ran cold as he realized this wasn't a coincidence. "Cassandra," he said quietly, trying to keep the panic out of his voice, "I think we have company." She spun around to look through the rear window, and her face went white as snow. "Oh God, they found me! They found me already!" The Mercedes was getting closer now, and Henry could see that it wasn't alone. Another black vehicle had appeared from a side street, moving to box them in. These weren't ordinary cars. They were the kind of vehicles that security firms and government agencies used. Bulletproof glass, reinforced bodies, and engines powerful enough to run down anything that tried to escape. Henry's mind raced. He was just a mechanic, a single dad trying to make ends meet. He didn't know how to handle this kind of situation. He'd never been in a car chase, never dealt with private security teams, never faced down billionaire families with unlimited resources. But looking at Cassandra, seeing the pure terror returning to her eyes, he knew he couldn't abandon her now. Whatever dangerous situation he'd stumbled into, he was in it now. "Hold on," Henry said, pressing harder on the accelerator. "We're not giving up that easily." Cassandra gripped the dashboard as Henry took a sharp right turn onto Oak Street, tires squealing against the wet pavement. The Mercedes SUVs followed, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights hunting for prey. "Why are you helping me?" Cassandra asked, her voice barely audible over the engine noise and the sound of rain hammering against the roof. Henry caught her eyes in the rearview mirror, and for a moment he thought about Lily asleep in his mother's house. Safe and innocent, trusting that her father would always make the right choices. He thought about Rebecca and the promise he'd made to her before she died, that he would always stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. "Because everyone deserves to choose their own life," he said simply, "and because no one should have to be afraid like this." The chase continued through the dark streets of Millbrook, and Henry realized that his decision to help this mysterious woman in white had just changed everything. His quiet life as a single father was about to become something much more complicated and dangerous. But as he looked at Cassandra, saw determination beginning to mix with the fear in her beautiful green eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, he wouldn't let Alexander Whitmore or his security team take her back against her will. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean as Henry drove into the night, carrying a runaway bride toward an uncertain future, and toward a confrontation with power beyond anything he'd ever imagined. Henry took another sharp left turn, his decade-old Ford Ranger, protesting with squealing tires and a grinding transmission. The black Mercedes SUVs stayed with him effortlessly, their powerful engines easily matching his truck's desperate attempts at speed. Cassandra was twisted in her seat, watching their pursuers with growing panic. "They're getting closer," she whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the door handle. "I know," Henry replied, his jaw clenched in concentration. He'd grown up in Millbrook, knew every street and alley, but the SUVs had the advantage of power, numbers, and professional drivers. "Cassandra, I need you to tell me everything. Who exactly are these people? What will they do if they catch us?" Cassandra's breathing was coming in short gasps. "My father's head of security is a man named Thomas Garrett. He's not just some corporate security chief, he's former military special forces, and he doesn't work for money alone. He works for my father because Alexander Whitmore gives him the kind of power he craves." A chill ran down Henry's spine. What kind of power? "The power to make problems disappear," Cassandra said, her voice barely audible. "Business rivals who won't sell their companies to Whitmore Technologies. Journalists who ask too many questions about my father's government contracts. Employees who discover things they shouldn't have discovered." Henry felt his stomach drop. You think your father would actually hurt people? I don't think it. I know it, Cassandra said, turning to face him. 3 years ago, a federal prosecutor was building a case against Whitmore Technologies for monopolistic practices. The week before the indictment was supposed to be filed, the prosecutor died in a home invasion. Nothing was stolen. The Ford's engine was starting to overheat, steam beginning to rise from under the hood. Henry knew they couldn't keep running like this much longer. He needed to think smart, not just fast. There's more, Cassandra continued, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. The reason my father wanted me to marry Jonathan Thornfield isn't just about political connections. Whitmore Technologies has been using federal contracts to develop surveillance software for intelligence agencies. Software that's supposed to track foreign threats but is actually being used to spy on American citizens. Henry took a right turn down Maple Avenue, hoping to lose their pursuers in the residential neighborhood. Your father is spying on Americans? Illegally collecting data on millions of people through social media platforms, smart home devices, and mobile apps, Cassandra confirmed. The software creates detailed profiles of citizens' political beliefs, financial situations, personal relationships, and potential vulnerabilities. Information that can be used to influence elections, manipulate stock markets, or blackmail politicians. And Senator Thornfield knows about this? Cassandra's laugh was bitter. Senator Thornfield helped design the program. He's the one who introduced the legislation that gave my father's company the federal contracts in the first place. In exchange, my father provides him with intelligence on his political opponents, their donors, their personal scandals, their weaknesses. Henry was struggling to process the magnitude of what she was telling him. This wasn't just about a runaway bride or an arranged marriage. This was about corruption at the highest levels of government, about the systematic erosion of privacy and democracy itself. The marriage to Jonathan was supposed to solidify their partnership, Cassandra explained. Once I was part of the Thornfield family, the alliance would be permanent. No one could investigate either family without investigating both, and they'd have too much mutual protection. The neighborhood streets weren't providing the cover Henry had hoped for. Both Mercedes SUVs had anticipated his move and were waiting for him as he emerged onto Riverside Drive. He was trapped between them with nowhere to run. "Henry," Cassandra said quietly, "you need to let me go. Pull over and let me out. This isn't your fight." "No," Henry's voice was firm. "I'm not abandoning you." "You don't understand what my father is capable of," Cassandra said desperately. "Alexander Whitmore will destroy you. He'll find out everything about your life, your job, your family, your daughter. He'll take everything you care about and use it as a weapon against you." Henry felt a cold fear grip his heart at the mention of Lily. His 8-year-old daughter was everything to him, the only family he had left after Rebecca died. The thought of anything happening to her made his blood run cold. But looking at Cassandra, seeing the resignation beginning to creep into her eyes, he knew he couldn't live with himself if he gave up now. "My daughter Lily is safe with my mother tonight," he said, "and I'm not letting you go back to that monster." Cassandra stared at him in amazement. "You don't even know me. Why would you risk everything for a stranger?" Henry was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. The Mercedes SUVs were closing in from both sides, but he found himself thinking about Rebecca, about the woman who had taught him that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing the right thing despite being afraid. 3 years ago, my wife Rebecca was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. She fought it for 8 months, but the treatments were expensive and our insurance coverage was limited. I watched the strongest, most beautiful woman I'd ever known waste away because we couldn't afford the experimental treatments that might have saved her life. He paused, swallowing hard at the memory. The night before she died, Rebecca made me promise something. She said that if I ever had the chance to help someone who was powerless, someone who needed a hero, I should take it. She said that's how we honor the people we've lost, by protecting the people we can still save. Cassandra was crying now, but not from fear. She sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was, Henry managed a small smile, and she would have hated your father. She always said that the measure of a person's character was how they treated people who had less power than they did. The SUVs were moving closer now, boxing them in from both sides. Henry looked around desperately, trying to find an escape route. That's when he remembered the construction zone 8 blocks ahead. The city had been renovating the old industrial district, leaving a maze of barriers and detours that might give them a chance. "Hold on," he said, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The Ford surged forward, heading straight for the gap between the two Mercedes SUVs. At the last second, Henry yanked the wheel to the right, scraping paint off his passenger door as they squeezed through. The SUVs tried to follow, but their bulk worked against them in the narrow space. "There," Cassandra pointed ahead to the orange construction barriers. "The industrial zone." Henry nodded, steering into the maze of concrete barriers and construction equipment. The Ford's smaller size allowed them to weave through obstacles that would stop the larger vehicles behind them. He could hear the Mercedes SUVs struggling to navigate the tight spaces, their engines roaring with frustration. As they emerged from the construction zone onto Factory Street, Henry allowed himself a moment of hope. They'd bought some time, but he knew it wouldn't last long. Alexander Whitmore had resources they couldn't match indefinitely. "We need somewhere safe to think," Henry said. "Somewhere they won't expect us to go." Cassandra was looking at him with something like wonder. "You really meant what you said back there about not abandoning me?" "I meant every word," Henry said firmly. "But Cassandra, I need to know, is there anything else? Anything about your father or this situation that I should know before we go any further?" Cassandra hesitated, and Henry could see her internal struggle. Finally, she spoke. "There's evidence, documents, recorded conversations, financial records that prove everything I've told you. My father keeps it all in a secure server at Whitmore Technologies." Henry felt his pulse quicken. Evidence of what exactly? The illegal surveillance program, the bribes to government officials, the cover-ups of safety violations at his factories, maybe even proof of the murders. Cassandra's voice was steady now, stronger than it had been all night. "My father is paranoid, but he's also thorough. He documents everything because he uses it as insurance against his enemies and partners." "If we could get that evidence," Henry began. "We could bring down both my father and Senator Thornfield," Cassandra finished. "We could expose the entire conspiracy and maybe save democracy itself." Henry was quiet for a moment, thinking about Lily, about the promise he'd made to Rebecca, about the woman beside him who'd found the courage to run from a life of golden captivity. "Where is this evidence?" "Whitmore Technologies headquarters, 40th floor, in my father's private server room." Cassandra looked at him intently. "Henry, I can't ask you to do this. If we get caught—" "Then we don't get caught," Henry said simply. "But first, we need to make sure Lily is safe, and we need to find somewhere to plan." As they drove through the quiet streets toward his mother's house, Henry realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have imagined. He was no longer just a mechanic trying to make ends meet. He was now part of something bigger, something that could either save American democracy or destroy them both. But looking at Cassandra's determined face, seeing the strength that had carried her through that country club window and into the night, Henry knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The rain was beginning to slow, and the first hints of dawn were touching the eastern sky. A new day was coming, and with it, new possibilities for justice and freedom. Henry pulled into his mother's driveway at 4:15 a.m., the Ford's engine finally giving up with a shuddering wheeze as steam poured from under the hood. They'd pushed the old truck beyond its limits, but it had gotten them to safety, at least temporarily. The modest two-story house with its cheerful yellow shutters and small front garden had never looked more welcoming. "Is this where your daughter lives?" Cassandra asked, looking at the well-maintained home with its flower boxes and the child's bicycle visible on the front porch. "Yeah, my mom Grace watches Lily when I work late shifts," Henry said, turning off the engine and sitting back. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, and he could feel exhaustion settling into his bones. "She's going to have a lot of questions." Cassandra looked down at her ruined wedding dress, now more mud and torn silk than the elegant gown it had once been. "I can only imagine what she'll think when she sees me like this." "She'll think you're someone who needs help," Henry said with confidence. "That's all she'll need to know." They made their way to the front door, and Henry used his key to enter quietly. The house smelled like his childhood. Lavender cleaning supplies, fresh-baked cookies, and the faint scent of the vanilla candles his mother loved. He could hear the soft murmur of the television from the living room, where Grace always dozed while waiting for him to come home from late shifts. "Mom," he called softly. Grace Jackson appeared in the hallway, a small woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was wearing her old terry cloth bathrobe and slippers, and her face showed the worry she'd been carrying all night. "Henry, honey, I've been so worried," she said, hurrying toward him. "Your shift ended hours ago, and when you didn't answer your phone—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Cassandra standing behind him, soaking wet in her torn wedding dress. "Oh my goodness," Grace breathed, her motherly instincts immediately kicking in. "You poor thing, what happened to you?" Cassandra looked uncertain, glancing at Henry for guidance. She'd spent her entire life around people who wanted something from her. Access to her father's wealth, connections to his power, or simply the prestige of being associated with the Whitmore name. The idea of unconditional kindness from a stranger was foreign to her. Henry stepped forward, putting a protective arm around Cassandra's shoulders. "Mom, this is Cassandra. She's in trouble and she needs our help. I know it's a lot to ask, but—" "Say no more," Grace interrupted, already moving toward Cassandra with open arms. "Come with me, dear. Let's get you out of those wet clothes and into something warm." As Grace led Cassandra down the hallway toward the bathroom, Henry felt a surge of love for his mother. She hadn't asked for explanations or details. She'd simply seen someone in need and responded with kindness. It was the same quality that had made her such a wonderful grandmother to Lily, the same generous spirit that had helped Henry through the darkest days after Rebecca's death. "Henry," Grace called back over her shoulder. "There's leftover soup on the stove and fresh towels in the linen closet. Make yourself useful." Henry smiled, despite everything. His mother could face any crisis as long as she had tasks to keep her busy. He went to check on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in his old bedroom, her dark curls spread across the pillow. She looked so small and innocent, completely unaware of the danger that had touched their lives tonight. The sight of his sleeping daughter made Henry's chest tighten with a mixture of love and fear. He'd brought danger to their doorstep by helping Cassandra, but he couldn't regret his decision. Lily deserved to grow up in a world where people stood up for what was right, where bullies like Alexander Whitmore couldn't destroy lives without consequences. 20 minutes later, Cassandra emerged from the bathroom, wearing a pair of Grace's pajamas and a warm robe. With her hair brushed and her face clean, Henry could see just how beautiful she really was. But more than that, he could see the strength in her posture, the determination that had carried her through the night. "Feel better?" he asked. "Much," Cassandra managed a genuine smile. "Your mother is wonderful. She didn't ask any questions, just took care of me like I was her own daughter." Grace appeared with a tray of soup and sandwiches, her practical nature taking charge of the situation. "Questions can wait until you've had something to eat and some rest," she said firmly. "But Henry, I do need to know, are we safe here? Should I be worried about Lily?" Henry looked at Cassandra, who nodded encouragingly. It was time to tell his mother at least part of the truth. "Mom, Cassandra was supposed to marry Senator Thornfield's son tonight. She ran away from the wedding, and her father's security people are looking for her." Grace's eyebrows rose as she processed this information. "Senator Thornfield? The one who's been on the news talking about surveillance and national security?" "The same one," Cassandra said quietly. "And my father is Alexander Whitmore." Grace set down the tray and sat heavily in her favorite chair. "Alexander Whitmore, the tech billionaire." She looked at Cassandra with new understanding. "Oh, honey, you were smart to run. I've read about that man in the papers. There's something cold about him, something that doesn't sit right." "His people chased us here," Henry continued. "I don't think they know about this house yet. But we can't stay long. We need to figure out what to do next." Cassandra spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all night. "I've been thinking. My father will expect me to try to leave the city. Maybe fly to California, where I have college friends. He'll have people watching the airport, the train station, the bus depot, but he won't expect me to stay and fight." "Fight how?" Grace asked, settling into her chair with the alertness of someone who'd raised children and knew when serious conversations were happening. "My father keeps evidence of all his crimes on a secure server at Whitmore Technologies," Cassandra explained. "If we could get that evidence to the FBI, to the press, we could expose him for what he really is." Grace was quiet for a moment, thinking. Getting into that building would be almost impossible, wouldn't it? "Difficult, but not impossible," Cassandra said. I know the building's security systems, the guard rotations, the access codes. I've been in and out of that building my entire life. The problem is that it's heavily guarded, and my father will have increased security after tonight." Henry felt a spark of hope mixed with terror. "You think we could actually do this?" "I think we have to try," Cassandra said. "Because if we don't, my father and Senator Thornfield will continue destroying people's lives. They'll keep spying on innocent Americans, keep rigging elections, keep murdering anyone who threatens their power." Grace was studying both of their faces. "This is dangerous, more dangerous than you're probably realizing." "I know," Cassandra said, "but sometimes the right thing to do is also the dangerous thing to do." "Your mother raised you well, Henry," Grace said after a moment. "Rebecca always said that a person's character was measured by what they did when it was hard, not when it was easy." Henry felt his throat tighten at the mention of his wife. "Mom, are you saying you think we should do this?" "I'm saying that I've been watching rich men get away with terrible things my entire life," Grace replied. "And I'm saying that sometimes ordinary people have to be the ones to stop them." Just then, Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Daddy? Why are you home so early?" Henry's heart clenched. His daughter was the most important thing in his life, and he'd just put her in potential danger. But he also knew that the world she grew up in depended on people like him having the courage to fight for what was right. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, kneeling down to her level. "I want you to meet someone special. This is Cassandra." Lily looked at Cassandra with curious 8-year-old eyes. "Why are you wearing Grandma's pajamas?" Cassandra knelt down to Lily's level, smiling gently. "I got caught in the rain, and your grandmother was kind enough to let me borrow some dry clothes. Your father helped me when I was scared and needed a friend." "Daddy's good at helping people," Lily said matter-of-factly. "He fixed Mrs. Peterson's car for free when she couldn't pay, and he always helps me with my homework even when he's really tired." Henry felt his chest tighten with emotion. His daughter's simple faith in him made him want to be worthy of her trust. As dawn broke over Millbrook, casting golden light through the kitchen windows, Henry realized they'd reached a point of no return. They could run, and maybe Alexander Whitmore would eventually stop looking for them. Or they could fight, and maybe change the world for the better. Looking at Cassandra's determined face and his mother's encouraging nod, Henry knew what Rebecca would have wanted him to do. The battle for truth was about to begin. The morning sun was fully up now, streaming through the kitchen windows as the unlikely group sat around Grace's worn wooden table. Lily had been given cereal and was happily coloring in her activity book, occasionally glancing up at Cassandra with the curious fascination that children have for new people in their world. "We need to talk about practicalities," Grace said, refilling coffee cups with the efficiency of someone who'd been managing crisis situations for decades. "If you're really going to try this, you'll need help, and you'll need to make sure Lily is somewhere safe." Henry had been thinking the same thing. "Mom, what about Aunt Sarah in Portland? She's far enough away, and she's always asking for Lily to visit." "Sarah would love to have her," Grace agreed. "But how do we get Lily there without these security people following us?" Cassandra had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up. "They're not watching your family yet. My father's people found us last night because they were tracking me, not you. They probably don't even know your full name or where you live." "Yet," Henry emphasized. "But once they start digging—" "Alexander Whitmore has resources that most people can't imagine," Cassandra said. "Private investigators, former intelligence agents, hackers, who can access any database. If he decides you're a threat, he'll know everything about your life within hours." Grace set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. "Then we need to move fast. I'll call Sarah and arrange for Lily to visit. I can drive her to Portland myself, just a grandmother taking her granddaughter for a weekend trip." "I don't want to leave, Daddy," Lily said, looking up from her coloring book with concerned eyes. Henry knelt beside his daughter's chair. "Lily, sweetheart, remember how we talked about being brave sometimes means different things?" She nodded solemnly. "Sometimes being brave means going on an adventure with Grandma so that Daddy can help someone who really needs it," Henry explained. "Cassandra is in trouble, and some bad people are trying to hurt her. I need to make sure she's safe." Lily looked at Cassandra with the directness that only children possess. "Are you scared of the bad people?" "Yes," Cassandra answered honestly. "I'm very scared, but your daddy is helping me be brave." My daddy is the bravest person I know, Lily said with absolute certainty. He'll keep you safe. The simple faith in his daughter's voice made Henry's chest tighten with emotion. He was about to undertake the most dangerous thing he'd ever attempted, and his 8-year-old believed in him completely. While Grace made phone calls to arrange Lily's trip to Portland, Henry and Cassandra stepped onto the back porch to plan their next moves. The morning air was crisp and clean after the rain, and the suburban neighborhood was beginning to wake up. Dog walkers, joggers, and early commuters were starting their normal routines, completely unaware that a fugitive billionaire's daughter was hiding in their midst. "Tell me about the Whitmore Technologies building," Henry said. "Everything you know about security, access points, guard rotations." Cassandra closed her eyes, visualizing the 40-story glass and steel tower that had been like a second home to her throughout her childhood. The building has 3 main security checkpoints: the lobby, the 20th floor where the executive offices begin, and the 40th floor where my father's private offices and the server room are located. What about surveillance? Cameras everywhere, motion sensors, facial recognition software, Cassandra said. But there are blind spots. Service corridors, maintenance areas, parts of the parking garage, the cleaning crews know them all. Henry felt a spark of hope. Cleaning crews? The building contracts with Millbrook Commercial Cleaning. They work night shifts, usually between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., Cassandra explained. My father is obsessive about security, but he's also arrogant. He doesn't see service workers as threats. Do you think we could get jobs with the cleaning company? Cassandra shook her head. Too risky. Background checks, references, it would take too long and leave too many traces. But there might be another way. She was quiet for a moment, thinking, there's a woman named Maria Santos who's been cleaning my father's office for years. She's worked for our family since I was a child, and she knows things. What kind of things? Maria has seen the private meetings, overheard the phone calls, watched my father destroy documents he didn't want found, Cassandra said. More importantly, she has access codes and knows the security protocols. If anyone could help us get into that building, it's her. Would she be willing to help? Cassandra's expression grew troubled. Maria has a family to protect, 3 children, including a daughter at Millbrook Community College. My father pays her well, but he also knows exactly how to pressure her. You think she'd be too scared to help? I think she'd be terrified, Cassandra said honestly. But I also think she's seen enough of my father's cruelty over the years to want it stopped. The question is whether she'll be willing to risk everything. Grace appeared in the doorway. Sarah's expecting you and Lily this afternoon. I told her it was a family emergency and you needed some time to handle things. She didn't ask questions. Thank you, Mom, Henry said. What about you? Will you be safe here? I'm going to visit my sister Ruth in Seattle for a few days, Grace said. Just a normal trip to see family. If anyone comes looking, the neighbors will just say we're all out of town. As they made final preparations for the family's departures, Cassandra pulled Henry aside. Are you sure about this? Once we contact Maria, once we start moving toward the building, there's no going back. My father will know we're coming for him. Henry looked through the kitchen window at Lily, who was carefully packing her favorite stuffed animals for her trip to Portland. His daughter trusted him to make the right choice, trusted him to come back to her safe and whole. 3 years ago, when Rebecca was dying, I felt completely powerless, he said. I couldn't save her, couldn't protect her from the cancer, couldn't even afford the treatments that might have helped. I swore I'd never feel that helpless again. He turned to face Cassandra. Your father is counting on people like me being too scared to fight back. He thinks ordinary people will just accept whatever he does to them. But he's wrong. This isn't about proving yourself, Henry. This is about survival. Mine and yours. No, Henry said firmly. This is about the kind of world I want my daughter to grow up in. A world where bullies like your father can't destroy people's lives just because they have money and power. Cassandra studied his face, seeing the determination that had been building since the moment he'd decided to help her. You really mean that? I mean every word. Rebecca taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you're terrified. An hour later, they were saying goodbye to Lily and Grace in the driveway. Henry hugged his daughter tightly, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and trying to memorize the feeling of her small arms around his neck. Be good for Grandma and Aunt Sarah, he whispered. Will you call me every day? Lily asked. Every single day, Henry promised. And when this is all over, we'll go to that new pizza place you wanted to try. With Cassandra? Henry glanced at Cassandra, who was watching this farewell with tears in her eyes. If she wants to come with us. I'd like that very much, Cassandra said, kneeling down to hug Lily goodbye. As Grace's car disappeared down the street, Henry felt the weight of what they were about to attempt settling on his shoulders. They were going up against one of the most powerful men in the country, a man with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. But they weren't going into this fight empty-handed. They had truth on their side, they had each other, and they had something Alexander Whitmore had never possessed, the knowledge that some things were more important than power or money. Ready? Cassandra asked. Ready, Henry replied. The real battle was about to begin. By early afternoon, the house felt eerily quiet, without Lily's chatter and Grace's bustling presence. Henry and Cassandra sat in the living room, surrounded by newspapers and Henry's laptop, researching everything they could about Whitmore Technologies' security protocols and Maria Santos's background. I found her address, Henry said, pointing to the screen. Maria Santos, 1247 Oak Street in the Riverside District. She's been with Millbrook Commercial Cleaning for 8 years. Cassandra nodded. That matches what I remember. She started working for the cleaning company right after my father's previous housekeeper quit suddenly. She paused, her expression darkening. Actually, quit isn't the right word. Elena was fired after my father caught her talking to a journalist about some documents she'd seen. What happened to her? Elena's family had to leave town when her husband mysteriously lost his job at the power plant, and they couldn't find work anywhere else in Millbrook, Cassandra said bitterly. That's how my father operates. He doesn't just punish the person who crosses him, he destroys their entire family's livelihood. Henry felt a chill run down his spine. And you think Maria knows about this? Maria is smart. She's seen what happens to people who cause problems for Alexander Whitmore. But she's also seen things that would make any decent person want to stop him. Henry closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. What exactly has she witnessed? Cassandra was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. 6 months ago, Maria was cleaning my father's office late one night when Senator Thornfield arrived for an unscheduled meeting. She hid in the supply closet when she heard them coming. What did she hear? They were discussing something called Project Spotlight, Cassandra said. A plan to use the surveillance data they've been collecting to manipulate the upcoming gubernatorial election. They have dirt on every major candidate, financial irregularities, personal scandals, family secrets. Henry felt his stomach turn. They're planning to blackmail their way to controlling the state government. Worse than that. They're planning to release selective information to destroy candidates they don't like, while protecting the ones who will serve their interests. They can essentially choose who wins every major election in the state. And Maria heard all this? Every word. My father and the senator were so confident in their security that they spoke freely. They even laughed about how easy it was to manipulate ordinary people who didn't understand how real power worked. Henry stood up and began pacing, trying to process the enormity of what they were facing. So we're not just dealing with corporate corruption or illegal surveillance. We're dealing with people who are actively trying to destroy democracy itself. That's why we have to stop them, Cassandra said. And why Maria might be willing to help us, despite the risks. How do we approach her? We can't just show up at her house and ask her to commit treason against one of the most powerful men in the country. Cassandra had been thinking about this problem all morning. Maria has a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, she attends English classes at the community center on Maple Street. It's a public place, lots of people around. We could approach her there. Today is Thursday, Henry realized. Today is Thursday, Cassandra confirmed. Which means we have about 3 hours to figure out exactly what we're going to say to convince her to risk everything. As they planned their approach to Maria, Henry's phone rang. The caller ID showed his mother's number, and his heart immediately jumped to his throat, fearing something had happened to Lily. Mom, is everything okay? Henry, honey, we're fine, Grace's voice came through clearly. Lily's having a wonderful time with Sarah, but I needed to warn you about something. What is it? I stopped by Mrs. Patterson's house to pick up some things I'd left there, and she told me that 2 men in suits came by this morning asking questions about you. Henry felt his blood run cold. What kind of questions? They claimed to be federal agents investigating some kind of fraud case. They wanted to know about your work schedule, your friends, whether you'd been acting strangely lately. Mrs. Patterson said they seemed very interested in whether you'd brought anyone home recently. Cassandra was watching Henry's face, and she could see the fear building in his expression. "They found us," she whispered. "Mom, you need to stay away from the house," Henry said urgently. "Don't come back until I tell you it's safe." "I figured as much," Grace said. "Sarah and I are going to take Lily up to the cabin at Crystal Lake for a few days. No cell service up there, but we'll check in from town every evening at 6 o'clock. "Good. Mom, be careful. These people are dangerous." "You be careful too, Henry. And honey, whatever you're doing, I'm proud of you." After hanging up, Henry turned to Cassandra with a grim expression. "Your father's people are already investigating me. They'll know everything about my life by tonight." "Which means they'll know about your mother and Lily," Cassandra said, her face pale. "Henry, maybe we should call this off. I can't live with myself if something happens to your family because of me." "My family is safe," Henry said firmly, "and we're not calling anything off. If anything, this proves that we're on the right track. Your father is getting desperate." Cassandra stared at him. "How can you be so calm about this?" "Because being afraid won't help us," Henry replied. "And because every minute we wait gives your father more time to cover his tracks and eliminate anyone who might threaten him, including Maria." The weight of that realization settled between them. If Alexander Whitmore suspected that Maria had overheard something damaging, he wouldn't hesitate to silence her permanently. "We need to warn her," Cassandra said. "We need to do more than warn her," Henry said. "We need to convince her to help us get that evidence tonight." "Tonight?" "Henry, we're not ready. We don't have a plan. We don't have equipment. We don't even know if Maria will agree to help us." "We don't have a choice," Henry said. "Your father knows I helped you escape. He's probably figured out that you're not running away. You're planning something. If we wait, he'll either move the evidence or eliminate anyone who could help us access it." Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the suburban street where Henry had grown up. Children's bicycles in driveways, American flags on front porches, the kind of normal, peaceful life that her father's corruption was slowly destroying. "You're right," she said finally. "If we're going to do this, it has to be tonight." Henry nodded, feeling a mixture of terror and determination. "Then, let's go talk to Maria." They spent the next hour preparing for the conversation that would determine whether their mission was possible. Cassandra wrote out everything she remembered about Project Spotlight, including dates, names, and specific details that only someone with access to Alexander Whitmore's private meetings would know. Henry researched Maria's background, looking for any personal details that might help them understand her motivations. "She has 3 children," Henry said, reading from his laptop screen. "Elena, 19, is a sophomore at Millbrook Community College studying nursing. Roberto, 16, is a junior at Riverside High School, and little Anna is only 8 years old." "The same age as Lily," Cassandra noted. "Exactly. Maria knows what it's like to be a parent, to want to protect your children's future. Maybe we can make her understand that this is about protecting all of our children." As they prepared to leave for the community center, Henry caught sight of his reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back at him bore a little resemblance to the tired mechanic who'd been driving home from work less than 24 hours ago. His eyes were alert, focused, determined. He looked like someone who was ready to fight. "Henry," Cassandra said as they reached the door, "I want you to know that whatever happens tonight, you've already done more for me than anyone else ever has. You've given me the courage to believe that we can actually win this." "We will win this," Henry said with quiet confidence, "because we have something your father doesn't understand." "What's that?" "We have something worth fighting for that's bigger than ourselves." As they walked out into the late afternoon sunlight, heading toward a conversation that would change everything, neither of them looked back at the house where they'd found temporary safety. There was no time for doubt now. No room for second thoughts. The real battle for truth, justice, and democracy was about to begin, and it would start with convincing one woman to risk everything for the chance to do what was right. The Millbrook Community Center was a modest brick building on Maple Street, surrounded by mature oak trees that cast long shadows in the late afternoon sun. Henry and Cassandra sat in his truck across the street, watching as people began arriving for evening classes. They'd been there for 20 minutes, observing the flow of students and trying to calm their nerves. "There," Cassandra said, pointing to a small woman with graying black hair who was walking up the front steps. "That's Maria." Henry studied the woman, who might hold the key to their entire mission. Maria Santos looked to be in her early 50s, wearing the kind of practical clothing that spoke of someone who worked with her hands for a living. She moved with quiet efficiency, nodding politely to other students but keeping to herself. "She looks tired," Henry observed. "She works 2 jobs," Cassandra said, "cleaning offices at night and working at a laundromat during the day. She's been supporting her family alone since her husband died in a construction accident 5 years ago." "An accident?" Henry asked, something in Cassandra's tone making him suspicious. "Roberto Santos was working on a Whitmore Technologies construction project when a crane malfunctioned. The safety investigation was handled by a company my father owned. They ruled it operator error, which meant no compensation for the family." Henry felt anger building in his chest. "But you don't think it was operator error?" Roberto had been operating heavy equipment for 15 years without a single incident, but he'd also been asking questions about some irregularities in the project's environmental impact reports, questions that were making my father's construction managers nervous. "Your father had him killed?" "I can't prove it," Cassandra said quietly, "but the timing was convenient, and the investigation was rushed. Maria knows there was something wrong, but she also knows that asking questions about Alexander Whitmore can be dangerous for your family's health." They waited until the English class had been in session for 30 minutes before entering the building. The community center was buzzing with activity. Computer classes for seniors, a support group meeting, teenagers playing basketball in the gymnasium. It was exactly the kind of place where ordinary people came to better themselves, to build stronger communities. The English as a second language classroom was on the second floor. Through the small window in the door, they could see Maria sitting in the front row, taking careful notes as the instructor explained irregular verbs on the whiteboard. Her concentration was total, as if mastering English was the most important thing in the world. "She's studying so hard," Henry whispered. "She wants to get a better job," Cassandra explained, "something that would let her work days so she could be home with Anna in the evenings. But most office jobs require better English skills." When the class took a break, Henry and Cassandra positioned themselves in the hallway. Maria emerged from the classroom and headed toward the water fountain, moving with the same quiet efficiency they'd observed outside. "Mrs. Santos," Cassandra called softly. Maria turned, and her face went through a series of rapid changes when she recognized Cassandra. Surprise, fear, confusion, and finally a kind of resigned understanding. "Miss Whitmore," Maria said in accented English, glancing around nervously, "what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," Cassandra said gently. "Please." "It's important." Maria's eyes darted between Cassandra and Henry, clearly calculating the risks of being seen with them. "I don't understand." "Shouldn't you be on your honeymoon?" "I didn't get married," Cassandra said. "I ran away from the wedding, and now I need your help." "My help?" Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. "Miss Whitmore, I clean offices. I don't know how to help someone like you." "You know things," Cassandra said. "You've seen things in my father's office, things that could help us stop him from hurting more people." Maria's face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." Henry stepped forward, his voice gentle but urgent. "Mrs. Santos, my name is Henry Jackson. I helped Cassandra escape from her wedding last night. We know this is dangerous, but we think you might be the only person who can help us get evidence of Mr. Whitmore's crimes." "Crimes?" Maria looked around frantically. "I don't know about any crimes. I just clean offices." 6 months ago," Cassandra said quietly, "you were working late in my father's office when Senator Thornfield came for a meeting. You heard them talking about Project Spotlight." Maria's face crumpled, and Henry could see that she was fighting back tears. "Please," she whispered, "I have children. I can't afford to lose my job." "Mrs. Santos," Henry said, moving closer, "I have a daughter too. Her name is Lily, and she's 8 years old, just like your Anna. I understand being scared for your children. But sometimes protecting our children means standing up to people who want to hurt them." "You don't understand," Maria said, her voice breaking. "Mr. Whitmore, he has power. He destroyed my husband. He could destroy my children's future." Cassandra gently took Maria's hand. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But Maria, if we don't stop my father, he's going to destroy this entire city. The election manipulation, the surveillance, the corruption. It's only going to get worse. I heard things, Maria admitted, looking around to make sure no one was listening. But I don't understand politics. I don't understand what it means. It means that your children won't grow up in a free country, Henry said. It means that people like your Elena won't have real choices about their futures, because everything will be controlled by men like Alexander Whitmore. Maria was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with an impossible decision. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help us get into the Whitmore Technologies building tonight, Cassandra said. There's evidence on my father's private server that could prove everything. Financial records, recorded conversations, proof of the murders. You want me to help you break into the building where I work? Maria's voice was incredulous. They'll know it was me. They'll destroy my family. Not if we're smart about it, Henry said. Not if we make it look like something else. What do you mean? Cassandra had been thinking about this during their drive to the community center. What if there was a problem with the cleaning schedule? What if you were called in for an emergency cleaning job because of a water leak or a sewage backup? The building has cameras everywhere, Maria protested. But there are blind spots, Cassandra said. Areas where the cameras can't see. You know them because you've been working there for years. Maria shook her head. This is crazy. You're asking me to risk everything. We're asking you to help us save everything, Henry said. Mrs. Santos, I know this is terrifying. I know you're thinking about your children, about what could happen to them. But what kind of world are we leaving them if we don't fight back against people like Alexander Whitmore? Just then, Maria's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her face went white. What is it? Cassandra asked. It's from Elena, Maria said, her voice shaking. She says 2 men came to the college today asking questions about our family. They claimed to be from immigration services, but Ina said they were asking about my work schedule, about whether I'd been, quote, acting strange lately. Henry and Cassandra exchanged glances. Alexander Whitmore was already moving against potential threats. They're not from immigration, Cassandra said grimly. They're my father's people. He's putting pressure on anyone who might have information about his activities. Maria stared at her phone, and Henry could see the moment when fear transformed into anger. They threatened my daughter? They're sending a message, Henry said. Cooperate, stay quiet, or your family suffers. Maria was quiet for a long moment, her hands trembling with rage. When she looked up, her eyes were blazing with a determination that hadn't been there before. My husband died because he asked questions about your father's business, she said to Cassandra. I've been quiet for 5 years because I was afraid. But if they're threatening Elena, will you help us? Cassandra asked. Maria took a deep breath. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. For the next 30 minutes, they planned. Maria explained the building's security protocols, the cleaning schedules, the best times to move through the building undetected. She drew sketches of the 40th floor layout, showing them where the cameras were and where the blind spots existed. The server room is behind a biometric lock, Maria explained. But there's a maintenance access panel that I use when I need to clean behind the equipment. If you can get past the main security checkpoint, I can get you into that room. What about getting past security? Henry asked. Thursday nights are the quietest, Maria said. Only 2 guards in the building, and they do their rounds every 2 hours. If we time it right, we can get in and out during their break. As they finalized their plans, Henry felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. They were actually going to do this. They were going to break into one of the most secure buildings in the city and steal evidence from one of the most powerful men in the country. One more thing, Maria said as they prepared to leave. If we get caught, I don't know you. We never had this conversation. Understood, Cassandra said. But Maria, if we succeed, your children will grow up in a world where people like my father can't destroy families with impunity. Maria nodded grimly. Then we better not fail. As they left the community center, Henry realized that they'd crossed a point of no return. They now had an ally, a plan, and a timeline. Tonight, they would either expose Alexander Whitmore's crimes or die trying. The sun was setting over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It felt like an omen. a promise that tomorrow would be a very different day. They had agreed to meet Maria at 10:30 p.m. in the parking garage beneath the Whitmore Technologies building. That gave them 3 hours to prepare. 3 hours for Henry and Cassandra to return to his mother's house and gather whatever equipment they might need for their infiltration mission. But as Henry pulled into his driveway, he immediately noticed something wrong. The front door was standing slightly ajar, and there were muddy footprints on the front porch that definitely hadn't been there when they left. "Someone's been in the house," Henry said quietly, his hand instinctively reaching for the tire iron he kept under his seat. Cassandra felt her blood run cold. "Do you think they're still inside?" "Only one way to find out." Henry turned off the engine but left the keys in the ignition. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, drive away and call the police." "I'm not leaving you," Cassandra said firmly. "Cassandra, we're in this together, remember? Besides, if it's my father's people in there, they're looking for me, not you." They approached the house cautiously, Henry gripping the tire iron while Cassandra stayed close behind him. The front door had been forced open, the deadbolt splintered from the frame. Professional work, but not subtle. The living room had been systematically searched. Cushions were overturned, drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. Whoever had done this wasn't trying to hide their presence. They wanted Henry and Cassandra to know they'd been there. "They're gone," Henry said after checking the rest of the house. "But they were thorough." Cassandra was staring at a family photo that had been knocked to the floor, the glass cracked across Henry's face. They were looking for something specific. "Or someone," Henry replied grimly. "Your father's people know we're working together now." That's when Henry's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but somehow he knew exactly who it would be. "Mr. Jackson," a cultured voice said when Henry answered. "I believe we need to talk." "Alexander Whitmore," Henry said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Very good. I'm calling to inform you that you've made a serious mistake getting involved in my family's affairs. But I'm a reasonable man, and I'm prepared to offer you a way out of this situation." Henry put the phone on speaker so Cassandra could hear. "I'm listening." "Return my daughter to me within the next hour, and I'll forget that any of this ever happened. You can go back to your quiet life as a mechanic, your daughter can continue her education without any interruptions, and your mother can enjoy her retirement in peace." The threat was clear, even couched in polite language. Henry felt his hands clench into fists. "And if I don't?" "Then you'll discover that I have a very long reach, Mr. Jackson. Your employer, Patterson's Auto Repair, has been struggling financially, hasn't it? It would be unfortunate if the city suddenly found numerous code violations that required the shop to be shut down permanently." Henry's jaw tightened. Patterson's was more than just his job. It was owned by an elderly man who'd given Henry a chance when no one else would hire him after high school. "Your daughter attends Riverside Elementary School," Alexander continued conversationally. "Such a lovely institution. It would be terrible if budget cuts forced them to eliminate their special needs programs. I understand Lily requires some additional academic support." The mention of his daughter made Henry see red. "If you touch my family—" "I don't make threats, Mr. Jackson. I simply point out consequences. You have involved yourself in matters far beyond your understanding or capability. This is your opportunity to extract yourself gracefully." Cassandra stepped forward and took the phone from Henry's hand. "Hello, Father." There was a long pause before Alexander Whitmore spoke again, and when he did, his voice had changed. Gone was the polite businessman, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Cassandra, I'm disappointed in you. Running away from your responsibilities, involving innocent people in your selfish rebellion. This behavior is beneath the Whitmore name." "The Whitmore name is built on corruption and murder," Cassandra replied, her voice stronger than Henry had ever heard it. "I'm ashamed to carry it." "You ungrateful child, do you have any idea what I've built, what I've accomplished, the power I've accumulated to protect our family's future?" "I know exactly what you've built," Cassandra said. "A surveillance state designed to control and manipulate innocent people. A network of corruption that reaches into every level of government. A criminal empire disguised as a technology company." Alexander's laugh was cold. "You always were naive, just like your mother. Do you think the world operates on fairness and justice? Do you think people like your mechanic friend matter in the grand scheme of things? People like Henry matter more than people like you, Cassandra shot back. He's decent, honest, brave, everything you'll never be. Decent people don't change the world, Cassandra. They get crushed by those who have the vision and strength to seize power. I'm offering you one last chance to remember which side of that equation you belong on. Henry could see Cassandra trembling with rage, but her voice remained steady. I know exactly which side I belong on. The side that believes ordinary people deserve freedom and privacy. The side that believes democracy matters more than corporate profits. Then you've chosen poorly, Alexander said. You have 1 hour, Cassandra. After that, Mr. Jackson's family begins to pay the price for your selfishness. The line went dead. Henry and Cassandra stood in the ransacked living room, the weight of the ultimatum settling between them. Alexander Whitmore had made his position clear. Surrender now, or watch innocent people suffer. He means it, Cassandra said quietly. Everything he just threatened, he'll do it all. I know, Henry replied, which is why we can't back down now. Cassandra stared at him. Henry, you heard what he said about Lily, about your job. If we go through with this mission tonight, he'll destroy everything you care about. If we don't go through with it, he'll do the same thing to other families, Henry said firmly. Your father is counting on me being too scared to fight back. He thinks that threatening my family will make me surrender. Won't it? Henry thought about Lily, safe at the cabin with his mother and aunt. He thought about Rebecca and the promise he'd made to her. He thought about Maria Santos and her children, about all the families that Alexander Whitmore had destroyed over the years. My daughter deserves to grow up in a world where bullies like your father can't threaten innocent people, he said. If I give in to him now, what kind of example does that set for her? Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. You're willing to risk everything. I'm willing to fight for everything, Henry corrected. There's a difference. He walked to the overturned bookshelf and pulled out a metal box that the searchers had missed. Inside were Rebecca's medical records, some important documents, and a small digital camera she'd used to document their life together. This camera has night vision capability, Henry said. We can use it to record whatever we find in your father's files. Henry, what if this is exactly what my father wants? What if he's trying to provoke us into making a mistake? Then we don't make any mistakes, Henry said simply. We get in, we get the evidence, and we get out. Clean and professional. Cassandra looked around at the destruction in the living room, evidence of her father's reach and ruthlessness. If we fail tonight, people will die. Not just us, but Maria, her family, maybe others. If we don't try, people will die anyway, Henry pointed out. Your father isn't going to stop being a monster just because we're afraid of him. Cassandra nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. You're right, we've come too far to give up now. They spent the next 2 hours preparing for the mission. Henry gathered tools that might be useful. Screwdrivers, wire cutters, a small flashlight. Cassandra wrote out everything she could remember about her father's filing system and the likely locations of incriminating evidence. At 10:15 p.m., they left the house for what might be the last time. As Henry locked the damaged front door, he found himself thinking about all the normal evenings he'd spent in that living room with Lily, helping her with homework, or watching cartoons together. Second thoughts? Cassandra asked, seeing his expression. No, Henry said firmly. I'm thinking about the future I want my daughter to have. A future where men like your father can't threaten families with impunity. As they drove toward downtown Millbrook and the confrontation that would determine their fate, Henry felt a strange sense of calm settling over him. He'd made his choice, and he was at peace with it. Tonight they would either expose Alexander Whitmore's crimes or die trying. But either way they would face their destiny together, fighting for something bigger than themselves. The Whitmore Technologies building loomed ahead of them in the darkness, 40 stories of glass and steel reaching toward the night sky. Somewhere in that tower was the evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful men in the country. And somewhere in that tower, their future was waiting. The underground parking garage of the Whitmore Technologies building was a labyrinth of concrete pillars and shadows. Henry parked his truck in a corner spot, far from the security cameras that monitored the main entrances. The garage was nearly empty at 10:30 p.m., with only a few vehicles belonging to night shift workers scattered throughout the vast space. Maria Santos was waiting for them beside a service door marked Authorized Personnel Only. She looked nervous but determined, wearing her cleaning company uniform and carrying a large canvas bag filled with supplies. "Any problems getting in?" Cassandra asked as they approached. "The security guards know me," Maria said quietly. "I told them I was called in for an emergency cleaning job. Water damage on the 35th floor from a broken pipe. They didn't question it." Henry felt a surge of admiration for the woman. Despite her fear, despite the risks to her family, Maria had shown up when it mattered most. "The guards are both on the 10th floor right now," Maria continued, checking her watch. "They'll stay there for about 40 minutes, monitoring the security feeds and doing paperwork. That gives us time to get to the 40th floor." Cassandra pulled out a hand-drawn floor plan. "Once we're in the server room, I'll need about 15 minutes to access the files and download everything onto flash drives." "What if this system requires biometric authentication?" Henry asked. "It will," Cassandra confirmed, "but my father never removed my access credentials. He's arrogant enough to believe I'd never have the courage to use them against him." Maria led them through the service door and into a narrow corridor lined with maintenance equipment and electrical panels. The building's bones were exposed here: pipes, cables, ventilation ducts, all the infrastructure that kept the gleaming corporate tower functioning. "This way," Maria whispered, guiding them to a freight elevator that was hidden behind a false wall. "The service elevators don't show up on the main security monitors. As long as we're quiet, we can get to the 40th floor without being detected." The elevator ride felt endless. Henry's heart was pounding so hard he was sure the others could hear it. Beside him, Cassandra was taking deep breaths, preparing herself for what they might find in her father's private files. Maria stood perfectly still, but Henry could see her hands trembling slightly. "Whatever we find up there," Henry said quietly, "we document it all. Every file, every recording, every piece of evidence. We don't get a second chance at this." The elevator doors opened onto the 40th floor with a soft ding that sounded deafening in the silence. They were in a service corridor that ran parallel to the main executive hallway, separated by a wall lined with maintenance access panels. "The server room is directly behind your father's office," Maria explained, leading them to a particular panel. "I can access it through here, but you'll have to crawl through about 20 feet of utility space." She opened the panel to reveal a narrow crawl space filled with cables and ventilation ducts. It would be tight, but they could make it through. "I'll go first," Cassandra said. "I know exactly what we're looking for." Henry watched as she disappeared into the crawl space, followed by the beam of her small flashlight. He went next, the metal ducts creaking softly under his weight. The space was claustrophobic and uncomfortably warm, filled with the electronic hum of servers and cooling systems. They emerged into the server room itself, a climate-controlled chamber lined with tall black servers, their LED status lights blinking like electronic constellations. The room was larger than Henry had expected, with rows of equipment stretching into the shadows. "There," Cassandra pointed to a specific server rack in the center of the room. "That's my father's private system. Everything we need should be on those drives." She approached a terminal and began typing rapidly, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Lines of code scrolled across the monitor as she navigated through security protocols and authentication systems. "I'm in," she whispered after several tense minutes. "The biometric scanner accepted my credentials." Henry positioned himself near the crawlspace entrance, ready to warn them if anyone approached. Through the thin walls, he could hear the distant hum of the building's ventilation system and the occasional creak of settling concrete. "My God," Cassandra breathed, staring at the screen. "Henry, look at this." He moved to her side and saw file directories with names like Project Spotlight, Operation Clean Sweep, and Blackmail Archive. Each folder contained hundreds of documents, audio files, and video recordings. "This is everything," Cassandra said, her voice filled with amazement and horror. Financial records showing bribes to dozens of government officials. Recorded conversations with Senator Thornfield discussing election manipulation. Evidence of at least 12 murders disguised as accidents. She began downloading files onto multiple flash drives, the progress bars crawling forward with agonizing slowness. "There's more here than I ever imagined. Corporate espionage, international money laundering, weapons trafficking through government contracts." "How long for the download?" Henry asked, glancing nervously at his watch. 10 more minutes, Cassandra replied. "But Henry, this goes deeper than we thought. It's not just my father and Senator Thornfield. There are Supreme Court justices, cabinet members, Fortune 500 CEOs, foreign intelligence agents. Henry felt a chill as he realized the scope of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about stopping Alexander Whitmore. They'd stumbled onto a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of American government and international business. We need to be very careful about who we trust with this information, he said. If it goes this high, there could be corrupt agents in the FBI, the Justice Department, anywhere. That's when they heard it. Footsteps in the main corridor outside the server room. Heavy boots, moving with military precision, getting closer. Someone's coming, Henry whispered urgently. Cassandra's eyes were fixed on the download progress. Still 5 minutes remaining. I can't stop it now. If we interrupt the download, we might corrupt the files. The footsteps stopped directly outside the server room door. They could hear muffled voices, too quiet to make out words but clearly discussing something important. Maria's voice came through their earpieces. She was monitoring from the service corridor. 2 men in suits just entered the executive floor. They're checking all the rooms. Henry's mind raced. They were trapped. The crawlspace was their only exit, but it would take several minutes to get everyone through, and the download wasn't finished. Keep downloading, he told Cassandra. I'll handle this. Henry, what are you? But he was already moving toward the server room's main entrance, the tire iron from his truck gripped firmly in his hand. If Alexander Whitmore's security team was going to find them, they'd have to go through him first. The door handle began to turn slowly, and Henry positioned himself behind it, ready to strike. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd risked, came down to this moment. Through the crack under the door, he could see shadows moving. 2 sets of feet, both wearing expensive shoes that spoke of professional operatives rather than ordinary security guards. The download progress bar showed 3 minutes remaining, 3 minutes that felt like an eternity. The door began to open, and Henry raised the tire iron, ready to fight for the evidence that could save democracy itself. Behind him, Cassandra continued typing furiously, racing against time to preserve the files that could bring down one of the most powerful criminal conspiracies in American history. In that moment, Henry understood that they weren't just stealing data, they were stealing hope. Hope that truth could triumph over corruption, that ordinary people could stand up to extraordinary power, that democracy could survive the cancer that had been growing in its heart. The door opened wider, and Henry prepared to discover whether that hope would live or die in the next few seconds. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped into the server room, his hand already reaching inside his jacket. But before he could draw whatever weapon he was carrying, Henry struck. The tire iron connected with the man's wrist with a sickening crack, sending his gun clattering across the floor. What the second man began, but Henry was already moving. Years of working with heavy machinery had given him strength and reflexes that the corporate security operatives hadn't expected from a small-town mechanic. Henry tackled the second man, driving him backward into the corridor wall. Behind him, he could hear Cassandra's fingers still flying across the keyboard, the download progress showing 2 minutes remaining. Thomas, report! A voice crackled through the first man's radio. What's your status on 40? The man Henry had disarmed was cradling his broken wrist, his face twisted in pain. We've got them, he gasped into his radio. 40th floor server room, send backup. Henry felt his heart sink. More security would be on the way within minutes, and they were trapped 40 stories above ground, with no escape road except the crawl space they'd used to get in. How much longer? He called to Cassandra. 90 seconds, she replied, her voice tight with concentration. The second security operative was trying to reach for his own weapon, but Henry pinned his arm down. Don't even think about it, Henry growled. You have no idea what you're dealing with, the man said through gritted teeth. Alexander Whitmore owns half the government. This evidence will never see the light of day. We'll see about that, Henry replied. That's when Maria's voice came through their earpieces again, but this time it was different. Calm, controlled, almost amused. Henry, Cassandra, I think you should know something. This building has been surrounded by FBI agents for the past 20 minutes. Henry blinked in confusion. What? I wasn't completely honest with you earlier, Maria continued. About 6 months ago, After I overheard that meeting between Mr. Whitmore and Senator Thornfield, I did something that terrified me. I called the FBI. The download progress bar showed 30 seconds remaining. Cassandra was staring at the screen in shock, processing what Maria had just revealed. "I've been working as an informant for Agent Rebecca Torres ever since," Maria explained. "She's been building a case against Mr. Whitmore, but they needed evidence from his private servers. Evidence that only someone with legitimate access could obtain." The elevator doors at the end of the corridor opened with a ding, but instead of more security operatives, a woman in an FBI jacket stepped out, flanked by federal agents in tactical gear. "Mr. Jackson, Miss Whitmore," the woman called out. "I'm Agent Torres. You can step away from those men now. We've got everything under control." Henry slowly released the security operative and stepped back, his mind reeling. "You're FBI?" "We've been investigating Alexander Whitmore for 2 years," Agent Torres said, approaching them with her badge clearly visible. "Maria has been feeding us information, but we needed someone on the inside who could access his private files." "Someone like me," Cassandra realized, the download finally completing with a soft beep. "When Maria told us about your escape from the wedding, we saw an opportunity," Agent Torres explained. "We've been monitoring your movements, providing protection when we could, and waiting for you to lead us to the evidence we needed." Henry felt a mixture of relief and anger. "You've been using us." "We've been protecting you," Agent Torres corrected. "Do you think it was an accident that Alexander Whitmore's security team always seemed to be one step behind? Do you think it was luck that kept you safe during that car chase through downtown?" Cassandra pulled the flash drives from the server, holding them like precious jewels. "So you have what you need now?" "We have everything," Agent Torres confirmed. "Financial records, recorded conversations, evidence of murder, election fraud, international conspiracy. Mr. Whitmore's criminal empire is about to come crashing down." "What about Senator Thornfield?" Henry asked. "Already in custody," Agent Torres said with satisfaction. "We arrested him 20 minutes ago at his campaign headquarters, along with 12 other co-conspirators, including 3 Supreme Court justices and a cabinet secretary." The sound of helicopters circling the building grew louder, and through the server room's small window, Henry could see news vans already gathering in the streets below. "There's something else you should know," Agent Torres continued. "Your father didn't just threaten your families. He was planning to eliminate you permanently. We intercepted communications showing that Thomas Garrett was ordered to kill both of you after recovering the evidence." Henry looked at the security operative who was still cradling his broken wrist. The man's face was pale, but his eyes burned with hatred. "You ruined everything," the man spat. "Do you have any idea how much money was at stake? How many important people are going to prison because of your meddling?" "Good," Cassandra said firmly. "That was the point." Agent Torres gestured toward the elevator. "We need to get you both out of here. The media is going to have a field day with this story. And you'll be the heroes who brought down the most significant corruption conspiracy in modern American history." As they made their way toward the elevator, Henry felt a strange sense of unreality. 24 hours ago, he'd been a tired mechanic driving home from work. Now he was apparently a national hero who'd helped expose a criminal conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. "What happens to Alexander Whitmore?" Cassandra asked as they entered the elevator. "He's being arrested as we speak," Agent Torres said, "at his estate in the hills. He won't be threatening anyone ever again." The elevator descended through the floors of the Whitmore Technologies building, each level taking them further away from the danger they'd faced and closer to a new future. Henry thought about Lily, safe at the cabin with his mother, and how proud she'd be when she learned what her father had done. "There's going to be a trial," Agent Torres warned them. "Months of testimony, media attention, political upheaval. Are you prepared for that?" Henry looked at Cassandra, seeing the strength and determination that had carried her through this incredible journey. "We've come this far together. I think we can handle whatever comes next." "Together," Cassandra agreed, taking his hand. As the elevator reached the ground floor, they could hear the commotion outside. Reporters shouting questions, camera flashes, the organized chaos of a major news story breaking. But Henry felt calm. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. Maria was waiting for them in the lobby, no longer wearing her cleaning uniform, but dressed in a simple but elegant dress. She looked different, confident, proud, no longer afraid. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth earlier," she said. "But the FBI needed you to act naturally, to make the choices you would have made without knowing about the investigation." "You played your part perfectly," Henry said, embracing her. "All of us did." Agent Torres opened the lobby doors, and they were immediately hit with a wall of sound. Reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking, crowds of people who had gathered to witness history being made. "Ladies and gentlemen," Agent Torres announced to the assembled media, "I'd like you to meet the Americans whose courage and determination brought down one of the most dangerous criminal conspiracies in our nation's history." As they stepped out into the bright lights and chaos of the media circus, Henry realized that their story was just beginning. They'd exposed the corruption, but now came the harder work of rebuilding trust in democracy and ensuring that people like Alexander Whitmore could never again accumulate such dangerous power. But they would face that challenge together, just as they'd faced everything else, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the federal courthouse in Seattle as Henry adjusted his tie nervously. He'd never owned a suit before this trial began, but Agent Torres had insisted that his testimony would carry more weight if he looked the part of a respectable citizen rather than a small-town mechanic. "You ready for this?" Cassandra asked, straightening his collar with the gentle efficiency that had become second nature to her over the past months. "As ready as I'll ever be," Henry replied, though his stomach was churning with anxiety. Today was the final day of testimony in United States versus Alexander Whitmore, and Henry was the prosecution's last witness. The trial had been a media sensation from the very beginning. Every major news network had covered it extensively, and the revelations that emerged daily had shocked the nation. The conspiracy was even more extensive than they'd initially realized, reaching into foreign governments, international corporations, and intelligence agencies around the world. "Remember," Cassandra said, "just tell the truth. That's all you've ever done, and it's gotten us this far." Through the courthouse windows, Henry could see the protesters gathered outside. Some carried signs supporting Alexander Whitmore, claiming he was a patriot who'd been framed by political enemies. But most of the crowd was there to support justice, holding banners that read, "Democracy Defended" and "Heroes Among Us." Maria Santos approached them in the courthouse hallway, looking elegant in a navy blue dress. The past 6 months had transformed her completely. No longer the frightened cleaning lady working multiple jobs to support her family, she was now a celebrated whistleblower whose courage had helped expose one of the largest corruption scandals in American history. "The prosecution team wants to speak with you one more time before you testify," Maria told Henry. "They want to make sure you're prepared for the defense's cross-examination." Henry nodded, though he felt confident about his testimony. He'd told this story dozens of times to FBI agents, federal prosecutors, congressional investigators, and grand juries. The truth had a way of staying consistent, no matter how many times you told it. "How are Elena, Roberto, and Anna adjusting to everything?" Cassandra asked Maria. Maria's face brightened. Elena graduated with honors and was accepted into nursing school on a full scholarship. Roberto is thriving at his new school, and Anna loves having a mother who's home for dinner every night. The FBI's witness protection program had relocated Maria's family to a safe location, and the foundation that had been established with recovered assets from Alexander Whitmore's criminal enterprise was paying for her children's education. More importantly, Maria had been hired as a consultant by the Justice Department, helping to train other potential whistleblowers and informants. "And your English classes?" Henry asked with a smile. "I'm teaching them now," Maria said proudly, "at the community college. Helping other immigrants find their voice in this country, just like you, and Cassandra helped me find mine." As they made their way toward the prosecution team's preparation room, Henry reflected on how much all of their lives had changed. The media attention had been overwhelming at first, but it had also brought opportunities none of them could have imagined. Cassandra had been offered positions at major technology companies, human rights organizations, and government agencies, but she'd chosen to start her own foundation focused on digital privacy rights and government transparency. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that Alexander Whitmore's frozen assets were now funding efforts to protect the very freedoms he'd tried to destroy. Henry had received offers to write books, appear on talk shows, and even run for political office, but he turned them all down, preferring to return to his work as a mechanic while also volunteering with Cassandra's foundation. The only offer he'd accepted was from Patterson's Auto Repair. His elderly boss had made him a full partner in the business, saying that anyone brave enough to take on billionaire criminals was exactly the kind of person he wanted helping to run his shop. The prosecution team was waiting in a conference room lined with law books and case files. Lead prosecutor District Attorney Sarah Chen looked tired but determined. She'd been working on this case around the clock for months, coordinating with federal agencies, international law enforcement, and congressional investigators. "Henry, thank you for being here today," DA Chen said. "I know this has been difficult for you and your family." "It's been worth it," Henry replied. "Knowing that Alexander Whitmore will never hurt another family makes everything we've been through worthwhile." "The defense is going to try to paint you as an opportunist who helped Cassandra steal classified information for personal gain," Chen warned. "They'll argue that you were motivated by the prospect of reward money or media attention." Henry shook his head. "Anyone who knows me knows that's not true. I helped Cassandra because it was the right thing to do. That's the only reason I needed." "That's exactly what we want you to say," Chen smiled. "Just tell your story honestly, the way you've always told it. The jury will see through any defense tricks." As they reviewed Henry's testimony one final time, Cassandra received a text message that made her face light up with joy. "What is it?" Henry asked. "It's from Grace," Cassandra said, showing him the phone. "Lily just lost her first tooth, and she wants to make sure we're home in time for the tooth fairy's visit tonight." Henry felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. Lily had adjusted remarkably well to all the changes in their lives, including Cassandra's gradual integration into their family. The little girl had embraced her father's new partner with the open-hearted acceptance that children excel at, and Cassandra had proven to be a natural stepmother. "We'll be there," Henry promised. "Win or lose today, we'll be home for dinner." An hour later, Henry found himself sitting in the witness box, looking out at a packed courtroom. Alexander Whitmore sat at the defense table, looking older and more frail than Henry remembered, but his eyes still burned with the arrogant fury of someone who couldn't believe his power had been taken away. The prosecution's questions were straightforward, allowing Henry to tell his story in his own words. He described that rainy night when he'd first encountered Cassandra, the car chase through Millbrook's streets, the growing realization of the conspiracy they'd uncovered, and the dangerous mission to retrieve evidence from the Whitmore Technologies building. When DA Chen asked him why he'd risked everything to help a stranger, Henry's answer was simple and heartfelt. "Because my wife Rebecca taught me that a person's character is measured by what they do when it's hard, not when it's easy." Helping Cassandra was hard, and it was dangerous, but it was also right. Sometimes that's enough. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive but ineffective. He tried to suggest that Henry had been motivated by greed or fame, but Henry's answers remained consistent and honest. When asked if he regretted his decisions, Henry looked directly at Alexander Whitmore. "I regret that it took so long for someone to stand up to Mr. Whitmore," he said. "I regret that families like Maria Santos's had to suffer for years before we found the courage to expose his crimes. But I don't regret helping Cassandra escape from a life of captivity, and I don't regret fighting for justice." When Henry stepped down from the witness stand, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He'd told his truth, and now it was up to the jury to decide whether justice would prevail. Alexander Whitmore was convicted on all counts 3 days later. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on charges of conspiracy, murder, election fraud, domestic surveillance violations, and dozens of other crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Senator Thornfield and his co-conspirators received similar sentences, and the revelation of their crimes triggered the largest government ethics investigation in American history. New laws were passed strengthening oversight of surveillance programs and corporate influence on elections. But for Henry, the most important victory was smaller and more personal. On the day the verdicts were announced, he was at home in Millbrook, helping Lily with her homework while Cassandra prepared dinner in the kitchen they now shared. The little girl looked up from her math problems and asked, "Daddy, are the bad people in jail now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Henry said, hugging her close. "The bad people are in jail, and they can't hurt anyone anymore." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction. "Now can we have ice cream for dessert?" As Henry laughed and agreed to the ice cream, he realized that this was what victory really looked like. Not the media attention or the courtroom drama, but the simple peace of knowing that his daughter could grow up in a world where justice was possible, where ordinary people could make a difference, and where love could triumph over fear. The battle was over, but the future they'd fought for was just beginning. 1 year later, the autumn sun cast golden light through the windows of Riverside Elementary School as Cassandra stood at the front of her third-grade classroom, watching her students work on their math problems with the same joy she'd felt when she first became a teacher all those years ago. "Miss Cassandra," a small voice called out, "I finished my problems. Can I read my book now?" "Of course, Marcus," Cassandra said, smiling at the earnest little boy. "But remember to keep your voice down so your classmates can concentrate." It had taken months of legal proceedings, congressional hearings, and media attention, but Alexander Whitmore was finally behind bars where he belonged. The evidence Henry and Cassandra had gathered had led to the largest corruption investigation in American history, resulting in convictions not just for her father, but for dozens of corrupt officials throughout the government. More importantly, the reforms that followed had begun to restore faith in democratic institutions. New oversight committees monitored surveillance programs, corporate influence on elections was heavily regulated, and whistleblower protections had been strengthened to encourage other brave souls to come forward when they witnessed corruption. Cassandra's father's business empire had been dismantled, with most of his assets used to compensate victims of his crimes and fund transparency initiatives. The Whitmore Technologies building had been converted into a community center that provided free services to low-income families, a fitting end to a monument to greed and corruption. "Mrs. Jackson," a familiar voice called from the classroom doorway. Cassandra turned to see Henry standing there with Lily, both of them smiling broadly. Lily was wearing her school uniform and carrying a drawing she'd made, as she had every day since Cassandra and Henry's wedding 6 months ago. "What are you two doing here?" Cassandra asked, her face lighting up. "Shouldn't you be at work, and shouldn't you be in your own classroom, young lady?" "It's early dismissal day," Lily explained, showing off a gap where her second tooth had recently fallen out. "And Daddy said we could come visit you at work because he has news." "And I brought lunch," Henry added, holding up a bag from their favorite deli. "I thought we could have a picnic in the school garden like we used to." Cassandra's heart swelled with happiness. In the years since Alexander Whitmore's arrest, she and Henry had built a life together that was everything she dreamed of. It wasn't glamorous or wealthy, but it was real and full of love and purpose. "Class," Cassandra announced to her students, "it's time for recess. Please line up quietly at the door." As her students filed out to the playground, Cassandra gathered her things. She'd been teaching at Riverside Elementary for 8 months now, and she loved every day of it. The school served many of the same neighborhoods that her father had planned to destroy with his corrupt development projects, and many of her students came from families that had been helped by the Victim Compensation Fund. "So what's this news?" Cassandra asked as they walked toward the school garden. Henry's grin grew even wider. "Patterson offered me full ownership of the auto shop. He's ready to retire, and he says he can't think of anyone he'd rather have take over the business." "Henry, that's wonderful!" Cassandra exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. "You deserve it." They found their usual spot under the old oak tree and spread out their blanket. Lily immediately began showing Cassandra her latest drawings, which had improved dramatically since Cassandra had started giving her art lessons. "Look," Lily said proudly, "I drew our whole family at the beach last weekend." The drawing showed Henry, Cassandra, and Lily building sandcastles, with Grace and Maria watching from beach chairs in the background. It was simple and innocent, but it represented everything they'd fought so hard to protect: the right to choose your own family, your own happiness, your own future. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Cassandra said, hugging her stepdaughter close. "Should we hang it on the refrigerator with all the others?" "Yes! And I want to make one for Grandma Grace and one for Miss Maria, too." Maria Santos had become like family to them over the past year. Her work with the Justice Department had made her a respected figure in law enforcement circles, but she still made time to attend Lily's school plays and birthday parties. The bond formed during those dangerous days had grown into something deeper, a chosen family built on shared values and mutual respect. As they ate their lunch, Henry pulled out his phone to show Cassandra a news article. "Did you see this? Congress passed the Whitmore Accountability Act this morning. It creates a new federal oversight board for government surveillance programs." "Named after your father," Henry added with a wry smile. "Though not in the way he probably would have wanted." Cassandra read the article with satisfaction. The legislation would prevent future Alexander Whitmores from accumulating the same kind of unchecked power that had nearly destroyed American democracy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "There's something else," Henry said, his expression growing more serious. "Agent Torres called this morning. They arrested 3 more co-conspirators in the Cayman Islands. Apparently, there were offshore accounts we hadn't discovered yet." "More money for the Victim Compensation Fund?" Cassandra asked. "More money and more justice for the families who were hurt by your father's crimes." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Lily chase butterflies in the garden while other families enjoyed their own picnics nearby. The simple normalcy of it all still amazed Cassandra sometimes. A year ago, she'd been trapped in a life of golden captivity, destined to become a political trophy wife. Now she was exactly where she belonged, teaching children, loving Henry, being the mother that Lily deserved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd driven past me that night?" Cassandra asked Henry. Henry considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I remember what Rebecca always told me, that everything happens for a reason, and our job is to make sure the reasons are good ones." "I think we managed that," Cassandra said, taking his hand. "I think we did too." As the afternoon wore on, and it came time to return to their respective responsibilities, Lily looked up at them with the serious expression she got when she was thinking deep thoughts. "Daddy, Cassandra," she said, "I'm glad you helped each other that night." "Why is that, sweetheart?" Henry asked. "Because now we're a real family. And families help each other when things are scary." Cassandra felt tears sting her eyes. Out of the mouths of babes came the deepest truths. They had become a real family, not because of blood or law, but because they'd chosen each other, fought for each other, and built something beautiful from the ashes of fear and corruption. "That's right, Lily," Cassandra said, hugging them both close. "Families help each other, and we always will." As they walked back toward the school building, Cassandra caught sight of the memorial garden that had been planted in honor of the victims of the Whitmore conspiracy. Among the flowers and trees was a simple plaque that read, "In memory of those who suffered, and in honor of those who fought for justice." She thought about all the families who had been torn apart by her father's greed, all the dreams that had been destroyed by his lust for power. But she also thought about the healing that had begun, the reforms that were protecting future generations, and the simple truth that ordinary people could make an extraordinary difference when they had the courage to stand up for what was right. The woman who had once been Alexander Whitmore's daughter was gone, replaced by someone stronger and freer. The frightened runaway bride in the torn wedding dress had become a teacher, a wife, a mother, and a guardian of the values that made democracy possible. As the sun set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of hope and promise, Cassandra Jackson walked into her future hand in hand with the family she'd chosen and the man who'd taught her that love was always worth fighting for. The story that had begun with a desperate escape had become a tale of triumph, not just over corruption and evil, but over fear itself. And the best part was that it was only the beginning. In classrooms and courtrooms, in family kitchens and community gardens, the work of building a better world continued every day. One choice at a time, one act of courage at a time, one family at a time. The future belonged to people like Henry and Cassandra and Lily, ordinary people who'd learned that they were capable of extraordinary things when they stood together against the darkness. And that was a lesson worth teaching, worth learning, and worth living every single day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.